the Bogosity podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the week of March 23, 2025, the podcast that killed rock and roll. This is your host, Shane Killian. Next week is the 5th weekend in the month, so that means it's time for a break. Podcasts will resume in April. Until then, let's dehydrate the news of the bogus. Swatting is back in the news, where someone makes a false report to the police, usually by anonymous tip, targeting someone and claiming there's some imminent threat like a kidnapping or hostage situation. The idea is to get the SWAT team to bust through their doors unexpectedly and possibly even shoot and kill them. Lately, there's been a rash of swatting targeting not only conservatives, but Tesla owners and employees as well. We've also covered the physical attacks on Teslas and Tesla stores, from graffiti to firebombing. One example is Joe Pags Pagliarulo, who reported that he was the target of swatting when he was woken up at 2 a.m. by armed police officers. He said, quote, "I called 911 because now we've got to find out. If it's the good guys, I've got to be very careful. If it's the bad guys, I've got to go out with my gun and try to protect my family." FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino exed, "Communication and transparency are my priorities. We work for you, the American citizen. Our teams are actively working on the Tesla incidents and the swatting incidents, along with our other responsibilities to keep the Homeland safe. Thank you." Other high-profile figures who have been swatted include Nick Sortor, Mike Engelman, Walter Kurt, and Owen Schroyer, and Chase Geiser was swatted twice. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem vowed to hunt down those engaged in this horrible practice. She exed, "Under President Trump's leadership, we will not sit idly by as conservative new media and their families are being targeted by false swatting. DHS has the ability to trace phone numbers and track location information. We will use it to hunt these cowards down. This is an attack on our law enforcement and innocent families, and we will prosecute it as such." Folks, I'm going to reiterate what I've said the other times we've covered swatting. This should be considered attempted murder. No one seems to have a number on how many swatting events there have been recently, but for each one of these high-profile instances, there are probably a bunch more we don't know about because they don't make it much further than the police blotter and the victims don't post publicly about it. With the recent rise in high-profile swatting, there could be dozens of instances nationwide. Thankfully, most police departments have learned that this is a thing, and they probably shouldn't go in guns blazing just on an anonymous tip. But come on, people, regardless of what you think of Trump or Musk or Tesla or InfoWars or whoever, respond with speech and activism, not violence, and certainly not the cowardly violence by proxy that is swatting.
Sometimes you just have to stomp some skulls. From the mind of Mr. Dapperton, a game for the ages. In a world where a race of undead furries tries to take over the world's nuclear arsenal, one man must stop them. But which man? You choose. The Orange Overlord.
Ow, my ear!
Bernie Slanders. Debate Dominator.
My kip was ruined.
Or Joe Sleepy.
Build me back.
And of course, Mr. Fancy Pants himself.
Forget those losers! You can get the Gold Edition and play as 4 more characters, including me, the Spooky Spaceman, along with Billionaire Brat, Professor Proof, and the easiest way to play, as Jesus himself.
7 complete different worlds, with more coming all the time. Full controller support. You can even get eaten by a worm and pooped out into a furry cathedral.
And don't forget that Gold Edition, where you can play the ultimate challenge, Devil's Doorstep.
This gory satirical adventure pulls no punches. You know you want this game. Go to links.bogosity.tv/skullstompers and play Skull Stompers now.
So the national debt gets a lot of attention, not least because it's currently over $36 trillion. But states and cities have enormous debts as well, and there can be few, if any, that have more debts than Los Angeles, where the deficit is nearly $1 billion. In fact, the LA Times called it a, quote, full-blown crisis, and quoted City Administrative Officer Matt Szabo saying layoffs were, quote, nearly inevitable. A lot of it was due to ballooning legal payouts, which is no surprise to us given the legal stories we've covered recently. The $300 million cost of dealing with the Palisades fires didn't help. But in addition to that, a quarter of the shortfall is due to pay raises for city employees. The reserve fund is also depleted. Szabo said, quote, we're not looking at dozens or even hundreds of layoffs, but thousands. And it's up to Mayor Karen Bass to present the strategy for how to deal with it by April 21. She tried to put a positive spin on it, calling it a, quote, fundamental change in the way the city operates. And that includes contracts with public union employees, apparently, as council members went into a closed-door session to look at the contracts the city had with police, firefighters, trash pickup drivers, librarians, park maintenance workers, and many others. Of course, union flunky David Green, president and executive director of Service Employees International Union Local 721, said that this was, quote, short-sighted and irresponsible. Okay, how would you pay for it then? Making this an even bigger deal is that they have to figure out how to pay for hosting the 2028 Summer Olympics. Another way to try and combat the shortfall is to increase trash fees, which could raise up to $200 million. Residents aren't going to like that, since they're already dealing with cracked sidewalks, streets that flood regularly, street lights that are out, and other issues they've been complaining about for years. Fundamentally, this is just about government doing too much. Proper cities are self-sustainable, and the idea was to have government just to manage a few services such as police and fire. But it never works out that way. Government gets more and more intrusive, taking more and more from the taxpayers while being less able to make good on its promises. But how could government ever work out any other way? And how long will it be before people learn the lesson? If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. So we've been covering the hilarious antics of DOGE and Elon Musk, and also how the people grifting on the taxpayer have gone running to corrupt judges to keep sucking down our money into their pit of greed. One thing the judges have been saying is that the president doesn't have any authority to simply cancel federal contracts, which is laughable on the face of it. As we covered, such contracts are 100% the purview of the executive branch, and under the doctrine of separation of powers, no judge can touch it. Any judge modifying that agreement at all is declaring himself superior to the president. Not to mention the fact that district judges shouldn't even be hearing federal claims anyway. That's for the aptly named Court of Federal Claims. so they're doubly out of their jurisdiction. But here's the thing. Despite federal district judges screeching to the contrary, there is a law specifically allowing the president to cancel any federal contracts at will. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, or FAR, is the principal set of rules regarding government procurement and codified in Title 48, Chapter 1 of the CFR, and covers all government contracts from NASA to the military to civilian organizations. One principle of FAR is known as the Christian Doctrine from the 1963 court case G.L. Christian and Associates v. United States. The Court of Federal Claims found that if FAR requires that a clause be included in a federal contract and that clause is omitted, it's considered to be included in the contract anyway. The court also found that this has the full force and effect of law, and government personnel cannot deviate from it without proper authorization. Contractors are presumed to know the law as well. A mandatory clause thus has full force even if it isn't in the contract itself. Rule 52.249-2 is titled Termination for Convenience of the Government, and it means exactly what you'd think. Quote, the government may terminate performance of work under this contract in whole or, from time to time, in part, if the contracting officer determines that a termination is in the government's interest. A separate rule, 52.242-15, allows the government to order the contractor to stop all or any part of their work for up to 90 days. Between January 20 and February 25, the government terminated 2,425 federal contracts for convenience and issued stop work orders on 205 others. That resulted in some $150 million in taxpayer savings. Jessica Tillotman, Associate Dean for Government Procurement Law Studies at George Washington University Law School, someone else with a business card 3 feet long, said, quote, most people are used to contracting in the commercial space, in which both parties are basically on equal footing. But when the government contracts with a private party, it's effectively like one party is a superpower, and it has all of these types of authorities and powers that you wouldn't normally see in a commercial contracting relationship. And in this particular instance, one of those powers is the right to unilaterally cancel a contract if it's in the government's interest. The only way the contractor can challenge it is if they can show the government acted in bad faith, but that's extremely difficult to prove and has a high standard to meet. But if it's a changing need or a new policy that's a reason, for example, quote, if you're at war and you're buying tons of ammunition and the war ends, you need to have that ability to stop those contracts so you're not buying crazy amounts of excess ammunition. They really have no leg to stand on, and they know it, but it's just about delay so they can get as much of our money as they can in the process. And by a lot of them doing it in concert across various courts and districts, they can seriously jam up the works and make that delay even longer. Quote, there's so many happening at once right now, I can't even fathom what the appeal courts and the Court of Federal Claims are going to look like for the next few years. I think this is going to create a significant amount of work for federal agencies to handle all of the terminations. It's going to create a significant amount of work for the judicial and administrative bodies that hear these cases. And it's going to be challenging for companies that are going to have to wait longer than usual to obtain payment that they're owed for many of these contracts. Not to mention all of our money that will be lost in the process. I think the Court of Federal Claims just needs to buy one of those big rubber stamps with the word dismissed on it and just stamp each and every one of these that comes in. That should help keep the docket clear. Termination for convenience clauses are standard boilerplate clauses in all government contracts. There's nothing out of the ordinary going on here, except that the Trump administration is doing a bunch of them at once. I've said it all along. Trump is only as good and always as bad as the people he has advising him. And while he's certainly got some bad advice this time around, he actually chose some good advisors in Elon and DOGE. Turns out, they did know what they were doing all along. I want want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv. And now it's time to pre-accumulate this week's biggest Bogon emitter. And it's another one for California Governor Gavin Newsom, as he tried to engage in some major backpedaling after the major Democratic loss in November, to the point where even a CNN chyron asked, quote, "What in God's name is going on?" Specifically, he's backpedaling about the ridiculous term Latinx to refer to Latinos and Latinas because sexism or something. It's a moniker that's been pretty soundly rejected by the Hispanic community. So, taking a tip from the Ministry of Truth, Newsom decided to try and rewrite history. Here's what he said on a podcast with Charlie Kirk.
Not one person ever in my office has ever used the word Latinx.
So can we finally put that to bed?
Yeah,
we agree?
where did that even
No
go?
more Latinx, everybody.
Well, I just didn't even know where it came from. I'm like, what are people talking about?
Unfortunately for him, we don't have many true, and not even CNN was letting him get away with it. They took a page from the internet, meaning that someone there is finally getting with the times, and played this mashup.
I hope we can really paint a picture in terms of our consciousness of how impactful this has been on the Latinx community. The Latinx and black communities. You've got politicians that are banning not assault rifles, but the word Latinx.
And as Andrew Kaczynski said,
these aren't minor shifts. These are progressive issues that Gavin Newsom used to champion until fairly recently, and now he's not just walking away from them. He's sort of acting like they were never legitimate with that clip talking about Latinx in the first place.
And it wasn't just about the politically correct Latinx term. They pointed out how he did an about-face on the trans athletes issues, saying the Democrats have it wrong, but completely ignoring his role in it.
In that statement, he's kind of making it sound like he wasn't involved in this at all. He's like, oh, it was in 2014, years before I was governor. Like, you mean when you were the lieutenant governor? When you actively defended and praised that law? And one of the videos that we found was actually him praising not just the governor at the time, Jerry Brown, but the California state legislature for putting that in place at the time.
And it was the same for the infamous Kamala Harris policy of taxpayer-funded sex change operations for detained migrants. Man, why does that sound like something from a Weird Al Yankovic song?
Gavin Newsom didn't speak out or say anything about it until now, 5 years later when it became a political liability. And in fact, he signed a landmark transgender rights bill for prisoners that affirmed their right to have this type of care. And he approved a state Medicaid expansion that also extended gender-affirming care to undocumented immigrants. So his record on this is really not matching the rhetoric that he was putting out in that podcast.
All right, well, fair's fair. We gotta hear Newsom's response to all of this.
So we reached out to their spokespeople. They declined to comment on record. They sent us on background comments that said that he's worked to protect transgender youth. They said, quote, Latinx is not a term that is regularly used by the administration, and they did not clarify his comments on transgender prisoners at all, saying only that the governor's comments speak for themselves.
Well, they're right about that. Those comments do indeed speak for themselves, and they're more than enough to make Gavin Newsom this week's biggest Bogon emitter. Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-aged children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins. And now let's unpredictabilify this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And this week, it's a story from our Instant Karma department about Daniel Clarke-Pounder, an anti-Musk activist who went about lobbing Molotov cocktails at Teslas and ended up setting himself on fire. I mean, self-immolation has been an attention-grabbing aspect of demonstrations for many centuries, going back to ancient Greece and Rome and even China. But that's not how you go about doing it. The 24-year-old spray-painted "Fuck Trump" and "Long Live Ukraine" on Tesla superchargers and set 3 of the superchargers on fire. When trying to use the last 2 of his Molotov cocktails, he set himself on fire. Witnesses saw him running off, apparently with the back of his shirt ablaze. Dude, stop, drop, and roll! Firefighters quickly cut the power to the charging stations. Fortunately, no one was injured in the attacks. It's not clear if Clarke-Pounder himself was injured. He was arraigned and granted a $10,000 bond. Release conditions include GPS monitoring, drug and alcohol testing, substance abuse classes, mental health evaluations, and taking prescribed medications, so it seems he may have a history of mental health issues. Reports from his arraignment reveal he had a manifesto in which he stated, quote, "We will not stand idly by," and also referenced the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson by Luigi Mangione, but the manifesto was filed under seal, and as usual they don't have a copy for us to see. But he did reference himself as being part of a broader movement. As we covered before, this is part of a nationwide movement, possibly organized and funded by left-wing extremist organizations to make Tesla pay for Elon's budget cuts. Yeah, someone seriously needs to trace that money. He faces a maximum of 20 years in federal prison and also potentially a lifetime of having the name Daniel Clarke-Pounder enshrined in the annals of the internet, including as this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. Well, that wraps up this Gadzooks, It Spooks edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord or at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from Ron Paul. Eventually, the immoral use of government violence, when things go badly, will be used to justify an individual's right to do the same thing. Neither the government nor individuals have the moral right to initiate violence against another. Yet we are moving toward the day when both will claim this authority. If this cycle is not reversed, society will break down. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.